Kenya seeks public participation on crypto bill after IMF warns against risk. So I really want to hear your breakdown, one, on the crypto landscape, and more so in this case, now that we are seeing government propose a bill around crypto and what that means. And do you think that really has any meaningful change, and to what extent that might look like?
Yeah. I think for somebody who's never really giving props to the government in any occasion, I have to take that L with this one and actually say that I think this is a very good step forward for Kenya as a whole with this particular piece of legislation. And I say that because of a couple of reasons, yeah? So, one, I've through my reading, because I read through the bill and then I just wrote down like a couple of things that I thought stood out for me. I thought it was a very balanced approach in terms of legislation, especially for a first bill with regards to the crypto industry. And I say that because, number one, I started by comparing it against other countries, how other countries have approached crypto regulation. Like guys in the US are a bit more heavy-handed right now because there's aspects of trying to really classify assets in terms of tokens. Is this a stable coin? Is this a crypto token? And what are the fundamentals behind this particular crypto token? Is it a security? Is it not? So there's this thing called the Howey test that's really clouded a lot of crypto regulation in the US. There's countries like South Africa that I think has a very defined body of legislation with regards to crypto. And there's also Singapore that I think to date is still one of the more balanced approaches towards approaching crypto regulation. And so the things that I really liked the most about this particular crypto regulation in Kenya is, beyond this, if you are trying to participate as a virtual assets provider in Kenya, the only thing you are slapped with was a letter of warning to banks from guys like CBK and CMA not to participate or not to interact with people who are participating in crypto. But what this bill actually does is that it begins by, I think, the one thing that I think they did really well was to avoid the most controversial aspects about crypto. So they're not trying to be the world leader in saying that this is an asset, or this is a token, or this is a security, like those things that are really still being figured out by the whole world. So I think they really avoided the things that are most controversial in the world around things like, is this a security? Is this not a security? Things that are still being figured out by a huge part of the world.
Let me catch you there and take you a step back, and perhaps you can give us an overview of the bill for those who haven't read it.
That's actually, yeah, okay.
And then just give us from a layman's point of view,
okay,
what's the point of the bill? What's it trying to seek?
So let's start.
And then we can get into what you find interesting.
There are two bodies in Kenya two main bodies that have pretty much been mandated with the task of authorizing anything to do with crypto activities in Kenya. That's the Capital Markets Authority and the Central Bank of Kenya, which is interesting because the way Kenya has taken an approach to this bill is by defining the different players who are virtual asset service providers, among which would be guys like a virtual asset wallet provider. Those are guys who are trying to do custodial wallet services, right? People who are trying to help people store tokens and crypto assets in general. Those are virtual asset wallet providers. There's also virtual asset exchanges, and these are your Binances. These are the guys who are helping the transfer, the conversion of a lot of these assets, doing things like trading, clearing. They've been defined very distinctly under a category, and also the regulator who's going to be over them. I think for the key ones that I saw, they're mostly going to be under the central bank. And then for guys who are doing things like holding virtual assets in trust on behalf of other people, those guys are going to be under the Capital Markets Authority. Then there's also guys like the virtual asset payment processors. And those, I think, for me, are also like where I'm also particularly interested, because that involves guys who are doing things as payment gateways, people who are trying to move between virtual assets and fiat currencies and so on and so forth. So what the regulation has really done well, in my opinion, is classify and category people. There are still questions to be had. Another thing that it's done that's really important is that it's made it mandatory to have a license as a virtual asset service provider to participate in crypto. And that's an annual license. And the details of it, obviously, have been left outside of the primary piece of legislation. And I think you know why. So that these bodies that are authorizing will decide on the actual fees for the licenses. And those things are usually subject to change depending on the prevailing things. Because I'm guessing some politics will be at play. I'm just saying because, I'm being a pragmatic individual here. But yeah, politics being at play, they will change the pricing of the licenses and discuss different nuances around like the actual cost. But licensing is going to be mandatory and it's going to be done by specified bodies. So those are the main things, I think, in my opinion, that were captured in that bill.
Let me ask a question. Because we're talking about crypto, whose, the main claim to why we use crypto is to go against an intermediary source of truth. We don't have a central source of truth. The network is the source of truth, right? We don't have anyone basically. In a nutshell, I'm saying it's like we're skirting government. How does this play back now that it seems that you're seeking permission from the government to use a tool which is primarily intended to go around the need? It goes against the whole peer-to-peer
aspect.
Yeah.
To be honest, that's a good question. But the problem is that I think when you think about crypto in terms of the vision of crypto, the purebred vision of crypto, it thinks of it in isolation to the existing financial system and the financial payment system. But the reality is when you come back to the ground, that is a long-term horizon for where crypto might end up in. But where we are at right now is that we actually need to move a lot of the assets that we have to become crypto assets. You need to move a lot of the fiat that you're holding, or a lot of the fiat value, into crypto value. And you see, at that place, it interfaces with central governments. It interfaces with central treasuries. It actually interfaces with the economy of a particular state. So, number one, it's almost always diametrically opposed to like the existing financial system in a particular country. But you cannot avoid the fact that you're going to be moving value both into crypto and out of crypto back into the economies of a particular state. Because really, what is an economy? It's when I can spend money to you to gain a particular need or good or service.
Goods or service.
Yeah. And at this particular point, most of crypto is still not legal tender for a lot of things. But it is a means of value in terms of other things like, like stablecoins being used for money transfers and things like that. I mean, a very interesting statistic is that I think the stablecoin volume last year almost doubled or tripled what Visa processed for the whole year in stablecoin volume. We're talking like over $2 trillion worth of value was moved as stablecoins, and people are swiping cards all over the world each and every day trying to do transactions. So there's still a lot of utility for it, but we still have to interplay with the real world. And I think because of that, there is need for regulation that identifies the innovation that it brings, but also balances it out with the needs of the state. In which case, I mean, like, actually a big part of this bill that, in my opinion, was left very intentionally vague was things around taxation. And the only preceding piece of legislation, I think, around taxation, from my reading at least, was something like the digital service tax in Kenya, which is very blanket, does not specifically apply to crypto. So that, I think, essentially means that still crypto is under that particular piece of legislation. So that's interesting. Or maybe like we can get a lawyer or someone who is well-versed in this to kind of explain this to us. But in my opinion, like there are some things that they really I think intentionally avoided, and there were some things that they wanted to address. But those are the most critical things. Because now, what this allows us to do is that if you are interested in participating as a player in this space, you can actually go and get a license. And you can open a bank account legally. And you can tell them like, hey, I'm a virtual asset service provider. I manage custodial wallets for clients, or I do payment processing for clients with virtual assets. And you can still get a bank account, and you can still trade with the bank, and you can still move volume. And it's not going to be taboo. People don't have to set up shells on shells on shells, or move a lot of that value into economies that already have this available. You see, so that's a lot of missed opportunity, I think, even on a taxation level for countries that don't have this particular piece of legislation. That's why I think in general it's overall good.
Interesting. And we'd love to hear the thoughts from all the crypto bros. Hey, bros.
Bros.
All the crypto bros.
Yeah, but it's a good step forward. It's a good step forward. I think a couple of things very important. If you are a player in crypto, tell us, like, is this, like, does this piece of legislation actually fit into how you are currently participating? If you're a P2P trader, what does this mean for you? If you're trying to move from USDT to USD or to Kenya shillings, and you've actually been in that business for a long while, does this thing make it more complicated for you, or does it make it more confusing for you? And in that case, by the way, this bill that was announced is actually a request for comments from the public. So I think we still have a chance to kind of participate in it and have our input in especially a lot of the controversial things. I think on a generic basis, it kind of touches the more important sweet spots for a first piece of legislation. But yeah, there's still a lot more work to be done. And when it becomes implemented by the authorities, that's where rubber meets. It's going to meet the road in terms of implementation. So I'm very curious. What do you guys think about this particular bill, especially if you're interested in it?